What are we to make of the Times story on Friday claiming that in May of 2017, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein both discussed the possibility of invoking the 25th Amendment and suggested he wear a wire in his dealings with the president? The only person who might be more upset than the president about this is Robert Mueller, as this will only fuel the cries of witch hunt regarding his investigation. If you're the president, you were just handed your last best opportunity to try and end the Mueller probe. Imagine this triple play. He calls AG Jeff Sessions and says, fire Rosenstein. When Sessions refuses, he fires them both. Then he installs a pliable AG who shuts down the Mueller probe. Far-fetched? Not in this climate. I'm not endorsing that course. I'm just observing the cover that the story provides him. Hard to believe he'll pass it up. At least one person told the Times Rosenstein brought up wearing a wire in jest. And in other outlets are now backing that up. But the Times reported he said it twice. In a statement to the Times, Rosenstein denied the story, calling it inaccurate and factually incorrect, and quoting anonymous sources based against the DOJ. And then after the White House meeting, issued a second denial to the Washington Post saying, quote, I never pursued or authorized recording the president, and any suggestion that I have ever advocated for the removal of the president is absolutely false. I want to know what you think. Go to my website, smerconish.com, this hour and answer this question. Will the president now fire Rod Rosenstein? Joining me now to discuss is Alan Dershowitz, Professor Emeritus of the Harvard Law School. His latest book is The Case Against Impeaching Trump. Okay, Professor, what will President Trump do now?
Well, if he's smart, he'll take advantage of this and not fire either any of these people, not Mueller, not Rosenstein, and not Sessions. Why? First of all, Sessions is going to be leaving after the midterms no matter what. As to Rosenstein, he certainly has the legal authority to fire him, the constitutional authority. No president has to tolerate in his midst somebody who may have tried to pull off a palace coup, though we ought to have hearings on this, put him under oath, put the other people who are in the room under oath. This is Kavanaugh reduct. We need to have facts rather than just denial. He said, he said, he said, she said. But what he could do very plausibly is have his lawyers go to court and make a motion to recuse Rosenstein from any involvement in any case involving the president, because he has a conflict of interest. He has two conflicts of interest. First, he wrote the memo, and according to the Times report, wrote it willingly, authorizing the firing of Comey. You can't both investigate an obstruction of justice and be part of the obstruction of justice. But second, he has a conflict now because the Times reports that his goal is to be vindicated, and the way he can be vindicated is by putting all the blame on President Trump. So I think a court would look seriously on a motion to recuse, and that wouldn't make it into a Saturday night or massacre. It would make it into pursuing a legal remedy that everybody is entitled to pursue.
As I heard the first part of your answer, you'd like to see him under oath answering questions as to whether this is true.
Absolutely. And not only him under oath, everybody else who was in the room. Let them testify as to A, what he said, what the tone was, are there any memos? Remember that his denial is a vague denial. He said, I didn't pursue or authorize it. He might still have said it. I think it's true that he didn't pursue it. He might have said it just to see what the reaction is. But if that tells us something about his state of mind after having written the memo to fire Comey, it tells us a great deal. But I don't think anybody should do anything until the facts are determined, just like in the Kavanaugh case. You know, people love to say, I believe him, I believe her, I believe him, I believe him. You're not entitled to come to conclusions about belief until you hear the facts. Facts are stubborn things, as John Adams taught us 200 and something years ago.
I'm going to ask you about Kavanaugh in just a moment. Last night, again with regard to Rosenstein, here's something the president said in Springfield, Missouri.
As you've seen what's happened at the FBI, they're all gone. They're all gone. They're all gone. But there's a lingering stench, and we're going to get rid of that too.
I think I know what he's talking about with the lingering stench. I think that's a reference to yesterday's story. I have to believe that this morning, as you and I are conversing, that the conversation at Bedminster, which is where the president is located today, is one of, am I better served with or without Rosenstein? And maybe the calculus is, I'm better leaving him there so that when the Mueller probe is concluded, I get to say, well, who's surprised about the outcome? After all, you had this guy Rosenstein who wanted to wear a wire on me.
I think that's the advice that Rudy Giuliani and his other advisors are giving him. Why create a problem for yourself by firing? Right now, Rosenstein's on the defensive. You're on the offensive. People are actually, for the first time, looking a little bit maybe sympathetic toward your claim that the investigation is not a completely objective one. I think yesterday was the best day for President Trump, and the day before. I think this Rosenstein revelation certainly plays into the hands of the Giuliani strategy, that is, that this is to be tried in the court of public opinion, looking toward a possible impeachment. And now if you have a tainted prosecution by a guy who was trying to conduct a palace coup in violation of the 25th Amendment. I mean, Rosenstein has to go back to school and read the 25th Amendment. It was designed for a president who's been shot, who's had a stroke, who's completely disabled. It was not designed to let people in the administration take over the government because they don't like the way it's being run or because there's disorder in the White House. That's not what the 25th Amendment was about.
On Kavanaugh, I underscore your comments about those weighing in, believing one or the other. I'm so disgusted with members of the Senate Judiciary Committee who have already rendered a verdict in this case without hearing from the participants. I have to say, therefore, I was disappointed with the president putting his thumb on the scale yesterday and saying, well, if something of this significance occurred, she or her parents would have gone to the FBI, he presumes.
I think he's completely wrong about that. We know from experts that many, many people who have been subject to sexual assault, particularly when they're 15 years old at a drinking party that she shouldn't have been at, are going to be very reluctant. And people, mature. And I think we have to understand why she may have waited to make this revelation to her husband, to her therapist. But she has to be questioned. And I think it would be best, by the way, to have him testify only after she testifies. She has to first make the accusation. During the Inquisition, they would have the accused first give his testimony, and only then would the accuser come forward. I think it would be also good if they were both examined by sensitive, experienced litigators rather than senators who are worried about their political futures and how they will look on television. And in the end, we'll all have an opportunity to come to some reasoned judgment. And I'll tell you what I think it's going to be in the end: inconclusive. And then we're going to have to come to a decision about whether, if we believe that there may have been something that was done wrong, 17-year-olds and 15-year-olds, by a man who led an exemplary life for the last 35 years, should that disqualify or shouldn't it? That's going to be a hard moral choice, but we shouldn't make it without absolutely all the evidence coming out. Yes, continue the FBI background probe. Give him as much time as they need. Don't have any deadlines. This is too important for political considerations to come into being, and we all have to pass the shoe on the other foot test. Would we be saying the same thing if this were a liberal president who nominated a liberal justice to the Supreme Court who had a similar accusation? I always apply and pass the shoe on the other foot test. I want to make sure everyone else does that. This morning, Hillary Clinton talked about an investigation. She was absolutely right, but she was not the right person to make that argument because she didn't pass the shoe on the other foot test when her husband was accused, and she participated in trashing the women who were making that accusation. You have to pass the shoe on the other foot test.
Listen, I like your comment relative to approach. I have been continually underwhelmed by the quality of questioning by members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Hey, Dersh, I'd like to see you do it. I'd much rather entrust you, or frankly, me, I'll carry the bag, to do the questioning of what's to come. Anyway, thanks for being here.
I'd rather have a sensitive woman, experienced litigator who would have the credibility on all sides ask the questions.